Hey guys, and welcome to Super Science Friday with Miss G. Today, scientists will be investigating how scientists make and use models to explain their ideas by reading and learning about models. So, today we're going to be reading a story, Frog Models, and we're going to be looking at some examples of models in order to get ready to make our own next time. Let's get started. So, first, we're going to introduce the exhibit. An exhibit is something in a museum that visitors look at or work with. The aquarium director wants to create an exhibit in the aquarium that uses models to explain how different types of animals in the aquarium defend themselves. If you've ever been to a museum or an aquarium, think about what you saw while you were there. You might have seen some live animals, like in an aquarium, you can see fish and sharks, or you might have seen models of animals. The aquarium director wants our help making new models for a new exhibit at the aquarium. This picture shows a person visiting an exhibit. It looks as if she is watching and listening to a video that is teaching her something new about an animal. We can look at some pictures to think about what exhibits are like. Some exhibits are small, like this one. Some exhibits are big. This exhibit uses models to show something. This is a big exhibit in a different museum. This exhibit has models of animals. It looks as if the models are showing the visitors something about what happens in nature where those animals live. And you can see models of a great white shark, a whale, and even some sea life on the bottom of the exhibit. There are many different kinds of exhibits. Some are very big and some are small. Some might use real plants and animals, and some use models. We will be making models for an exhibit in the aquarium. Our exhibit will use models to help explain how different defenses help different animals survive in the ocean. So this chapter question for the beginning of chapter 4 is, how can aquarium scientists explain animal defenses to the visitors? So we're going to have to figure out how we can create our own models or drawings of models to help explain animal defenses to our visitors. Some defenses we've learned about are spikes, spines, and shells, camouflage, poison, and venom. So we're going to be thinking about how we might use those defenses in our models to explain how animals use them. So in our last few weeks, we were making models to explain our ideas. We made models of some spikes, shells, and spines. We made models of camouflage. So remember back to what we did. We were able to create a model using clay and a comb as the predator. And the model showed us what? Turn and tell someone next to you. Great. The model showed us that a predator could easily get its prey if it didn't have a defense. So in the 3 boxes below, we can see different defenses. Here we can see how we modeled using a shell or armor. In this one, we can see how we modeled spikes. And in the last one, this is how we did our models of camouflage. So think back to what the models helped you show. Great. The models helped us explain what we figured out about how shells, spikes, spines, and camouflage helped protect animals from the predators. Today, we're going to be investigating together, how do scientists make and use models to explain their ideas? So the first thing we're going to do today is take a closer look at models. We're going to be reading this book, Frog Models, to learn about 2 students, Luz and Juan, who are making models of some frogs they saw. As we read, I want you to be thinking about, what did they do in their model? How did their model explain their thinking? And at the end, we'll be going over some models together. The children in this book work as scientists to make models that explain their ideas. Let's read to find out how they plan and make their models. Reading this book can help us think about our own models for our exhibit and help us start to plan what we might want to do in our own models. Saw a snake. Luz saw two frogs in the leaves. Would the snake eat the frogs? The snake did not see the frogs and kept going. Look, the frogs are brown. The frogs are shaped like leaves. So we're going to stop for a minute and I want you to visualize or make a movie in your head about what happened on the forest floor. Go ahead, make that picture in your head. Great, so you might be imagining there's a snake slithering along the forest floor and there are some brown frogs hiding in a pile of brown leaves. You might have said, oh, the snake went right by because it couldn't see the frogs. Let's keep reading to find out more. At home, Luz and Juan talked about the frogs. Why didn't the snake find the frogs and eat them? I have an idea about why the snake didn't find the frogs, said Luz. The frogs were the same color as the leaves. I think the color made the frogs hard for the snake to see. How can I explain my idea? I know, I can make a model. A model will help me explain my idea. So here Luz is thinking of a way to show her thinking about the frogs. Here is my model. I made paper circles. They are brown like the frogs. Let me show you my model. It will help me explain. Look, the color makes the circles hard to see in the leaves. So when Luz tests her model and puts those brown circles on top of the brown leaves, she's using a defense to help protect those frogs. Think about what defense she's modeling in this picture. Wow, great job. Right, she's modeling camouflage. The brown leaves are almost the same color as the brown circles and make it hard for a predator to see. What was Luz's idea about why the snakes did not eat the frogs? Think out loud or turn and talk to someone near you. Right, Luz's idea was that the snake could not see the frogs because they were brown, just like the leaves. Now Juan says, I have an idea too. The frogs were the same shape as the leaves. I think the shape also made the frogs hard for the snake to see. I will make a model too. I will use the brown paper and cut out leaf shapes. My model will help me explain. So here, Juan is going to do a model to share his thinking about why the snake did not eat the frogs. Let's read on to see what he does. Look, the shape makes the paper pieces hard to see in the leaves. The color makes them hard to see too. So think out loud or talk to someone next to you and share your thinking around what was Juan's idea. Right, the frogs are a shape that is very similar or almost the same as the shape of the leaves, so the snake could not see them hiding. How did Juan's model show his idea? Turn and talk to someone next to you or just think out loud. Right, Juan's model showed his idea because he made shapes that were like the shape of the frog. He put them in the leaf and then, just like the frogs, they were hard to see. Juan's shapes were hard to see because they were brown like the leaves. We used our models to explain why the snake did not see the frogs. The color and shape of the frogs made them hard for the snake to see. That is why the snake did not find the frogs and eat them. Mama loves frogs. Let's use our model to explain to her why the snake did not eat the frogs. Look, Mama, the color and shape of the frogs made them hard to see. And if you look closely at the picture, you can see that Luz and Juan have placed their model frogs on the leaves in order to explain and show their thinking to their mama. So now we're going to visualize or make a picture in our head of how Juan and Luz are using their models to explain to their mom. Imagine that you were Juan or Luz. If you were going to explain your model to your mom, what would you do and what would you say? Go ahead, think out loud or share with someone near you. Wow, so the movie in your head might have been showing how Luz was explaining that the color of her leaves, of her frog model, and the leaves made it hard for the snake to see. Well, Juan was explaining how the shape of his leaves and frogs were almost the same, and he was able to camouflage the frogs by using their shape. What else can we explain using models? So right now, share out an idea about this question on the last page of the book. What else can we explain using models? Great thinking, guys. There's so many things in this world that we can explain using models. And let's continue so we can see how we can explain our scientific thinking using models. So remember, this is what scientists do. Every time scientists work to answer questions, first they observe, like we did in the story. We looked closely at the picture and saw what was happening with the leaves and the frogs. Then we read, which we just did with our book. Scientists communicate. They share their thinking out loud and with others. Then they make models to test their thinking. And finally, explain. So today we're going to be thinking about how they're making models to explain their thinking. How did Luz and Juan work as scientists today? Right, they observed what was happening outside with the snake and the frogs, and then they made models to show their thinking. So for our last activity today, we're going to be taking a closer look at frog models and evaluating them. Evaluating them means we're going to be looking at what they did, how they worked, and what we think about them. Did this model show the thinking? Did it have all the important parts? Does this model work? Could it help explain to visitors? So we're going to be evaluating frog models today using our modeling checklist. So we know scientists use models to explain their ideas. We will be using this checklist to review our ideas about models. So scientists make sure their model explains an idea. So the first thing on our checklist is, did I choose an idea to explain? When scientists make a model, they want to make sure that they're explaining their idea and that their model is helping them check their work. Next, we ask ourselves, did I include parts that are important for explaining my idea? And did I leave out parts that do not matter for explaining? So models are similar to the thing that they are trying to explain, but they are not exactly the same. In our book, we saw their models, they were using paper. They were able to use brown paper to be similar to the color of the frogs, and Juan was able to cut some shapes that were similar to the frogs, but neither one were exactly the same as the frog. They were creating a model that looked like the frogs. And remember, models show only the important parts. So when we're making models, we have to make sure we include the parts that are important for explaining, but we can also leave out parts that don't really matter. Things like little details that you might not notice or things that aren't showing our idea. So we're going to together today practice using the checklist, and we're going to check how well Juan's model explains his idea. And we'll do this first check together, and then later on, you guys will be checking a model using the same modeling checklist. So remember, the first question on the checklist is, did I choose an idea to explain? So remember, Juan wanted to explain how the frog's shape made the frogs hard for the snake to see. He said, I have an idea too. The frogs were the same shape as the leaves. I think the shape also made the frogs hard for the snake to see. So, Juan chose an idea to explain using a model. He chose the idea of the frog's shape, and then his model showed his thinking by creating a model of frogs that were the same shape as the leaves. So we would give him a check in the first box on the modeling checklist. The second question on the checklist is, did I include the parts that are important for explaining? So again, we're going to check if Juan's model included parts that are important. Look, the shape makes the paper pieces hard to see in the leaves. So the shapes were the important part for explaining why the snake could not see the frogs. Did Juan include this important part about the shapes? Yes, Juan included the important parts for explaining by cutting the paper in the same shape as the frogs. Then he put the paper shape in the leaves where the frogs were. The shape of the paper and the leaves are the important parts for explaining why the snake could not see the frogs. So again, he showed the shape of the leaves and the shape of the frogs to explain his thinking. The third question on the checklist is, did I leave out parts that do not matter for explaining, or leave out parts that are not important for my idea? Let's check if Juan's model left out parts that did not matter. Look, the shape makes the paper pieces hard to see in the leaves. So again, Juan's idea was about the shape of the frogs. He did not include other frog parts like the lines on their back, their eyes, or their mouths. Those parts were not important for explaining his idea about shapes. So we would give him a check. Yes, Juan left out the parts that did not matter. There are other parts of a frog that he could have included in his model, but those were not important for explaining his idea. Only the shape was important for explaining his idea about shapes. So now we're going to take a look at Luz, and you're going to have a chance to practice some of this checklist yourself. Let's read again. How can I explain my idea? I can make a model. A model will help me explain my idea. So first we're thinking, did Luz choose an idea to explain using a model? Right. Her idea was to show the color, and we see her cutting out some circles in brown paper. Do you think that that is going to let her explain her model of how the color can help protect the frogs? Yes. So she was able to explain her idea. Now we're going to look at the next question. In her model, did Luz include important parts for explaining her idea? Think about what parts Luz included in her model. Did she include all of the important parts for explaining her idea? Share your thinking out loud. Right, her model showed her idea about color by using brown paper because it was the same color as the frogs, and also by putting the brown paper on the leaves, she was able to show how the color helped them hide. So our last question on the checklist is, did I leave out parts that do not matter for explaining? Think about Luz's model and what you know about frogs in the forest. Did Luz leave out parts that did not matter for explaining her idea? Right, she left out parts that were not important. Her model only shows the frog's color, which was her idea about how the color can protect the frogs from predators. She didn't show things like the shape or extra body parts on the frogs because those weren't her idea. Her idea was just about making a model of how color can help the frogs become camouflaged. Great work, guys! So somebody made this new frog model to explain the same idea that Luz explained. Now you're going to practice using the modeling checklist with this new model on the next slides in Google Classroom. So make sure you have your modeling checklist handy. You can study the pictures of the new frog model, and you're going to work to answer each question and complete the modeling checklist for this new frog model. Remember, you're thinking about, did the model share the idea and explain my thinking? Did the model include parts that were important? And does the model take out parts that are not important or not necessary for explaining? So go ahead, get your modeling checklist from your packet, return to the Google Classroom, and on the next slide, you'll be able to work along and check this new frog model. Great job, guys. Can't wait to see your work.